Okay, Tammy, welcome. Could you start by just telling a little about yourself, both as a person and as a researcher?
Yes, thanks so much for having me. My name is Dr. Tammy Nelson, and I am a licensed sex and relationship therapist. I've been a therapist for about 35 years, which makes me tired just saying it out loud. I've written 6 books. My 6th book just came out with Sounds True Publishing. It's called Open Monogamy, A Guide to Co-Creating Your Ideal Relationship Agreement. I'm the host of the podcast, The Trouble with Sex, and I'm the executive director of the Integrative Sex Therapy Institute, where I train therapists to be sex and couples therapists. And I have a private practice right now in Los Angeles, California, where I see couples mostly on Zoom still, but I do intensives in person, where we're just starting to get to the end of the pandemic here, so it's starting to open up a little bit in person.
Okay, nice to hear. Here in Denmark, we have been open for quite a while now. It's such a relief. Mm-hmm. So I met you actually. We two met at a course in Denmark in 2009, I think it was, and I was very impressed. You had just written this book, Getting the Sex You Want, and it's very inspiring. And I remember you as very, very dedicated to this quest, or what can you say, the goal of helping people tap the untapped resources, sexual resources within a relationship. What made you so interested in especially that part of couples therapy?
Well, and you may have found this too. I did so much training and education and graduate degrees and certifications, postgraduate, in how to work with couples and relationships. And no one ever talked about sex, which I find so fascinating. We're talking about people in romantic, emotional, committed partnerships. And we're not just talking about people who are roommates, right? And yet in all of these programs and all of these educational systems, no one ever talked about the sexual part of a relationship. I found that fascinating. I think I had 15 minutes of training in my graduate program. And then even in the post certifications, they talked about sex as if it was some sort of bonus that was going to happen after you fixed your relationship. Yeah, and only if you got along really well.
Yeah. Okay. I have the same experience actually in my own education as a psychotherapist. I was so angry. I was so annoyed that sexuality wasn't a part of the curriculum. So I got so mad that I chose it as a topic for my thesis. So they had to listen to it. But what do you think? How come that it takes so little space in this field?
I think it's the same in regular everyday life as it is in the psychotherapy field. Like, we're taught not to ask about it, not to talk about it, that it's somehow private, and that, in general life, look, we talk the least about sex to the person we're actually having sex with. And so why should, people talk about it in couples therapy? They're awkward enough at home alone. And so we tend to, in couples therapy and in psychotherapy, focus on attachment and emotional connection first, as if, sex is going to happen as a result of that. But in actuality, the more emotionally attached you are and the safer you are, it doesn't necessarily lead to better or more sex. Sometimes that can kill your sexual relationship. So we've been looking at psychotherapy and couples therapy from a sort of feminist perspective, or feminine perspective, not feminist. And I think that we have to look at it from a more shared male-female balance perspective, that sometimes you can have sex and feel more emotionally attached. You don't have to wait till you're attached to have sex. And that's something that's taken a while for our field to wrap their minds around, because we don't like to tell people it's okay to have sex even if you're mad at each other or you're not getting along. Somehow that feels like, antithetical to intimacy. But honestly, it's really not. Like, we can work on our sex life even if we're not getting along.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you see as the main struggles that people have within couples about sexuality?
Well, I think there is a desire discrepancy in most couples. Like, we want different things. We want it on different days. One person wants it more, and it differs throughout your relationship. So, when you first meet, if you have kids, when the kids get older, when the kids move out, when the kids move back, we go through different phases of our relational lives and also of our life individually. Our hormones change, our stress levels change, our jobs change. We want different things throughout our lives, but we sort of project onto each other that we should want it the same way all the time. And we should want our partners the same way all the time. And really don't have much education around how to stay attracted and interested sexually in our partners for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, sometimes 70 years. So we really have to change the way that we talk about relationships and how to make them sexier and more alive.
Yeah, and more open, and that's the topic of another podcast. But this gap between two people's desire within a relationship, how does it evolve? Why does it evolve?
Well, I think the desire gap is probably always there. It just feels like it creates attraction in the beginning. Like, we're attracted to someone in this space in between us. We long for someone over there. And then when it's sitting next to us every night on the couch, maybe not so much, which is what I think we found in the pandemic, right? Like, we were quarantined at home with the same person in this overly domesticated environment, and people's desire levels decreased. Our sex decreased in general, and actually online affairs increased dramatically. Ashley Madison, which is a married but dating website for people to cheat.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, they increased to 75 million members worldwide during the pandemic. So we know that people's desire was still there, but not necessarily for the person that they were in domestic situation with. So, I think that we need a little bit of space in our attraction, in our desire. We need a little bit of a gap to stay interested. But then we blame the gap on our, what I call attraction dysfunction. Like, I don't like you now, or I'm not attracted to you now because of our differences. Whereas in the beginning, I found that really, really hot.
Yeah, makes sense. In my view, in my experience, this gap can create a vicious circle of anger and guilt and withdrawal. That's what I see a lot in couples therapy. I know this is a simple question to a very, very complicated issue, but what are your main recommendations to people who are stuck in this vicious circle?
Well, I think it depends. It depends on where the couple is at. If they have been in a sexless relationship, or if they're having sex but the sex isn't good. Like, it's not pathological to not want to have disappointing sex. Like, if somebody says, not really into it, I think we have to find out, well, is it because the sex isn't really rewarding? Like, if you don't want to go to the party, that makes total sense. So we have to figure out how to make the party more exciting. If it's good sex or good enough sex, but you're losing interest for other reasons, is it relational because you're not getting along? Is there been some kind of trauma? Is there been some kind of trauma in the relationship, like an affair? Or has there been illness? Or is there, something hormonal going on, something stress related? Let's first of all figure out what's going on. But I would recommend to everyone to have a sex date once a week. I think you really need to set aside time. You know, you need time, attention, affection, and sex. So if you're not setting aside time that is really specially allotted to some kind of intimate connection, separate from the rest of the week, then it's not going to happen by itself, especially if you've been together for a long time. You need time together to pay attention to your sex life. So I would tell everyone to have a sex date once a week, the same time every week, so that you can pay attention to each other and maybe, you know, create something affectionate between you so that it can maybe lead to sex. It doesn't have to lead to like penis and vagina intercourse if you're a heterosexual couple, but maybe start with massage or something that is affectionate, something that feels kind of sexy and intimate, you know, where you light some candles, you put on some music, you separate it out from the rest of your busy lives. Because, you know, we all have busy lives and we all have things we got to do that, you know, are about the running of our roommate lives together.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I, both as a private person, as a man, and in my experience as a couples therapist, see as a very, very common killer of desire is pressure, the perceived pressure. How would you recommend, because this weekly sex date, as you call it, might also be perceived as a kind of pressure. So how would you advise people to deal with this pressure issue?
Yeah, I think we have to shift the idea of sex from a performance, like getting to the finish line, getting an erection, having the male, sexual ejaculation as being the ultimate goal, because that's really what we think of when we think of Western heteronormative sex. You know, if you can't get an erection, we'll give you a pill and, you know, help you get there. But that's the ultimate sign of success. Instead, to take that off the table altogether and think of sex as pleasure. So what is it that could be pleasurable on those date nights that has nothing to do with intercourse? Like, let's just take that off the table altogether, so that the first couple weeks you do just massage, like you massage each other until you fall asleep. So you would massage your partner until they fall asleep, and then the next week they would massage you until you fall asleep, but no bikini areas, like no bathing suit areas. And then the third week, maybe you could touch other places, but no orgasm, no insertion, and then you switch. So that you're slowly remembering what it's like to touch each other just out of pleasure. Because so much stuff gets in your head about that pressure and about, I have to be, quote unquote, in the mood, and I have to have this spontaneous desire. Like, when I see you, I'm going to sweep the dishes off the kitchen table and say, oh my God, take me now. You know, and that's really not how desire works. So we have to sort of remember what it feels like to let our partners touch us, or just touch them just out of pleasure, because it feels good and for no other reason.
Yeah. Rediscovering pleasure. Yeah. Well, this job of yours, it must be very exciting. You get to talk to people all around the world. You get to make research in a very, very important field. What are the main factors? What's brewing in you on the forefront of your research?
Well, certainly opening people's monogamy agreements has been a big part of what I've been thinking about and moving towards. But in the sex therapy world in general, like for therapists, I think I really dedicated a big part of my career to training all therapists to know how to work with sexual issues. I'm always shocked and surprised when couples therapists don't know how to work with sex. And yet there's a lot of new programs out there that are training people to be sex therapists, and they don't talk about couples therapy. And that just amazes me. So I'm really dedicated to doing trainings for people in integrative sex and relationship therapy, so that if you're a therapist, it doesn't matter if you're a psychologist or a social worker, you should know how to work with relationships. I mean, everyone's in a relationship. And if you're going to talk to people about relationships, you should at least know the basics of how to talk about sex and feel comfortable with it. So that's really my mission in the last parts of my career, is to make sure everyone's certified as a sex and couples therapist.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. What's the next we can expect from you? What's brewing in your projects?
Well, interestingly, I just got certified to do MDMA, assisted psychotherapy. So the next sort of level of therapy at least in the States, is psychedelic therapy, because it's MDMA is ecstasy, or Molly is a type of empathogen that was created actually to work with couples. And it's in the third phase of FDA trials, and it's about to be approved by the FDA for prescription. And so I'm looking forward to that this year, to do couples therapy retreats using that medicine that I think is a way for couples to go deeper into empathy experiences and to bypass some of the anxiety. They're using it in trials with trauma now, and the government is saying it's really a breakthrough treatment. And there's a lot of research coming out about how important MDMA and some of the psychedelics, plus things like ketamine, are in working with people who are traumatized. And I really like to see the integration of that with couples work. So I'm really excited about that. I think in the next 5 years or so, that'll be one of my focuses, to see how that really can play out.
Okay, could you explain shortly what it actually does to people, this stuff?
Yeah, so it affects, well, particularly MDMA affects the dopamine levels in your brain. It doesn't add anything to what you already have. It just releases serotonin, dopamine, and decreases the anxiety around either memories or trauma experiences, and helps you to experience your partner or the people around you as less of the enemy that you might project onto them, and more as a safe person that's sort of on your side. So it reduces the anxiety, the story, the narrative that we make up about our partner, that they're trying to hurt us, that they're against us, they're not on our side. And when all of those sort of walls are down, we can do some real work with our partner around healing past conflicts, traumas in our relationship, and have conversations that I think are a little deeper and more meaningful. And the work that they've done with extreme trauma, people coming out of warfare, and first responders work, it's quite extraordinary. Like within a couple of sessions, they have less than 3 markers for PTSD, where they're going in with 50. I mean, it's really tremendously successful. And so I'm really, really intrigued by that. And if you want more information, I can send you links that you can put in your show notes, so people can write to me as well and find out. Yes,
please. Sounds very interesting. Okay, Tammy, 1,000 thanks for your participation. We're going to make one more podcast, but thanks for now.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And if your listeners have any questions, they can go to my website, drtammynelson.com, drtammynelson.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions if they want to email me through that. They can find my books anywhere books are sold, including Amazon, or they can go to openmonogamy.com.